91% of companies are going into overrun. Yeah, it's all fine. It should not be fine in the future. We should have some control over the spend.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Applied FinOps. I'm joined with Frank once again. Today we're chewing on a piece of research that landed in February. DoiT commissioned it, but the fieldwork was done by Sapio Research, an independent agency with no vendor ties. It was 500 finance leaders, manager level and above, across the UK and US, all at organizations with 1,000+ employees, and all of them currently spending on AI tools. The headline numbers are roughly what you'd expect, that there's 100% of them are spending on AI, 3/4 have a ring-fenced budget, and AI is now 17% of total tech spend. But none of that is really, to me, the story. The story is when you start cutting up the data by seniority, by FinOps maturity, by country. And there's one number in particular that surprised me when I first read it. So let's just get right into it. So Frank, there's a stat in the report that kind of broke my brain for a second. The orgs that rate themselves very mature or leading edge in FinOps have the highest overrun rate in the whole sample. It's 89%. And they had the largest mean overspend at 31%. So it's not these early stage organizations in FinOps, it's the most mature ones. And the reason to me is that the reason isn't that the maturity makes you bad at cost control. I think it's the opposite. I think it's the maturity is what lets you see the overruns in the first place. So these early stage organizations that are saying they're avoiding overruns, to me, it's a little bit of you have blinders on and you think that we're good, we're spending the right amount. I think it's because they don't have the actual maturity, the maturity paradox I've been thinking about calling it.
That's a really good name, by the way. So well done, you. I would agree. At the same time, we are talking about self-assessment. So people are defining themselves as FinOps mature on their own. So there is a bit of that. In line with what you just said, the number that was impressive for me is that the company which are the most technical, the SaaS ones in particular, are the one with the most overruns. I would agree that these ones are also the one that are the most mature in FinOps probably. So I think what it shows is that we are still trying to figure out what are the tools and the methods we need to build to control this AI thing. And in particular, these companies which are running into the overruns now, they're ahead of the game. They're the ones that are going to find the best practices sooner because, yes, we are all in experimentation. So, yes, I agree with you. When I read that number, I was like, oh, wow. And then I saw I think just after that, there is this other one. It is the most technical ones are the one struggling the most with overrun. Okay, so yes, we are in experimentation from the FinOps perspective, which is good because it means that we're moving forward.
Yeah, the maturity is two levels, right? On one hand, if maturity is that you have controls in place, or visibility really, we're not even talking about controls. We're talking about not prevention, not detection, just pure visibility. Do I know where, if I spend N million on tokens, what am I getting back in return? Do I have an understanding cost attribution? All the things that we consider in FinOps, the crawl stage, really. But to your point though, I fully agree with that the most leading edge companies in technology are the ones probably facing overruns. And I think that's because of two things. If you recall, I think in April, the Uber CTO came out and said we had a budget for the full year for our engineers to use AI, and we've blown past it already in 3 months. And then you think about all these articles and news coming about places like Meta, where they're actually tracking the token spend of their engineers. And it is on one way, the forcing function to get your organizations to be AI pilled, as Twitter calls it. One hand, for sure, you can say, hey, everyone should be using AI. But this is one of the downsides to me of gamification, right? If the gamification is similar to optimization, in FinOps, we always talk about, hey, how do we incentivize engineers who quote unquote don't care about FinOps to care? On one hand, you can gamify it and say, any team that saves the most will be on a leaderboard or whatever. In this instance, if you gamify your organization to say, we're going to reward people who use the most amount of tokens, all of a sudden someone's going to say, yeah, I got to check my lunch menu. Let me use Opus 4.7 for it because a token is a token.
Yes.
Right? We're not at the level where we can say each token is not the same. Right? Each output that you're actually using AI for is not the same. The quality is not the same, so on and so forth. And to me, that is real visibility, right? It's almost like what we're looking at now when you think about visibility in AI is really around just a cost level, right? Visibility that I know which person, which API key, which division is spending what on AI. And yet there's a deeper layer to it, which is, yeah, but how are they actually using it? Forget the ROI question of what are we getting back in return and whether it's worth it or not. But how you're using it as a dimension, I think, an Venn diagram that if you ignore, you're just going to get a very incomplete picture at best, inaccurate at worst.
Yes, and I think that's something we've had and we have not fully completely solved with code, is that every line of code, you know how many line of code, how many commits every developer will have done. You know the lines they wrote. You don't know always the return of the effect of that line of code or how important it was or how impactful it was. So I think we had that problem. It's just that AI makes it much more expensive, fast, and also unpredictable. Because part of, for me, the biggest, I would say problem, yes, is every time I write a prompt, I have no clue ahead of time of how many tokens that's going to consume. Or if I ask for agents with a task, how many tokens, how many interaction, how many LLMs are going to be involved into delivering my function. So it's really hard to anticipate, or at least today, it's really hard to anticipate how much what you're doing. And as a developer, I would say understanding how much my line of code or my change will have as a cost, as a consumption of token or all these kind of things, which is why I think it goes back to what we've talked about earlier. These companies, very advanced tech companies, which are having overruns because they're trying things, because they're trying to grasp how all of this works.
Yeah. The other thing I think is that development is where I think a lot of the AI focus has been up till now.
Yes.
Right? We expect our engineers to be, once in a while, you could hire a 10x engineer, the person who can really move a mountain. Now I think with agentic AI and harnessing how to use AI correctly, you can be a 100x engineer, right?
Yes.
You hear about these companies like Ramp and other ones that are almost building in the open. A lot of the internal tools they have are now being open source because they realize there's so much value in what they're creating in the harness, so to speak. But equally importantly, I think, is with the AI is that all the other functions in an organization, marketing, sales, you name it, all those also benefit from AI, right? At the end of the day, anyone who has a workflow that is manual, laborious, connecting the dots from exporting data, and you take a look at FinOps, right? You have a tool, you extract data from it, you put it in Excel, you connect your other data, put it into a PowerPoint, then it goes to the C-suite. And that's how we normally show numbers, right? A lot of those work is just laborious and it's prone to error, and it takes a lot of time doing these tasks. AI can help with a lot of those things. So I think not only unlike when we had regular cloud, which was still at the end of the day for engineers to deploy the infrastructure.
Yep.
From the AI side, it's not only that now the engineers where we have to track cost, we also have to figure out, which we never had to before, what is the value of these non-technical functions using AI and what should the limits be, right?
Yes.
Do you allow your marketing team to have $10,000 a month spent on Claude? First of all, before there was no budget for this, how do you actually quantify that? So it's really funny when you look at the word overrun, it almost feels like what was the basis to begin with in the first place? Was it similar to Uber's where we said, let's put this number and let's track against it, and the second we go over overrun? I feel like we're still figuring out how to leverage AI in our companies to have a level of budgets that then we can confidently say we have either overrun it or not overrun it yet. I think it's almost a little too early.
It is all too early. I think what was very interesting from the report that we were talking about today is there was a massive difference between two ways of using AI. One is the one you're talking about, which is the operational excellence. You target to become better at all the works you're already doing. So everything you find an inefficiency or something that can be done with AI or accelerated through AI, you use it. And that's operational efficiency, and that works great. And that was, by the way, the UK kind of approach, it seemed from the document, is where, let's say Europe, which is more fearful of going all in and all out, are focusing in is on the stuff they control and understand. At the same time, it's in the US companies we are more targeting growth. Is I want to use AI to create new revenue, to enter new markets, to be more visible on the outside. But the interesting bit is that now we really have these two approaches. So are you going to use AI to improve what exists? Or are you going to use AI to create something new? And I think that's the question, even for the auditors, is do you have a strategy in here deciding which path you're going to take? You're obviously going to do both, but there is one part which will need more budget and will need to be the priority for the company.
Frank, let me ask a question around the UK versus US. I also found that kind of stuck out. Why do you think that is? Is it the culture? Is it just that the way companies in America are almost geared towards 100xing, 10xing, whatever, and there's a level of conservatism in the UK companies that don't allow them to do this? Or what do you think that is?
Well, I think there is, first of all, there is lots of things that come from culture. And the way you see yourself is completely different than the way you judge even people and things outside feedback, in particular, how you give feedback. I remember talking with some people at Amazon, and they were highlighting how in the US, if you don't have a 5-star, it's bad. 4 is just bad. 3 is catastrophically bad. While, for example, in the UK, having 4-star is considered good and 5-star is exceptional. And so there is a cultural vision. So when you ask someone and you tell them, look, how do you see yourself for your maturity? In the UK, they'll tell you more something like, not too bad, as opposed to, oh, we're really good.
Right.
Really good is something you don't say. You always talk, in the UK in particular, compared to how miserable life is, and that's where you start from.
Right. As a resident UK expert, I will take you on that one. The point you bring up, though, of being used for two very different things. One is the efficiency gains in your organization. The other is to drive the company growth. When it comes towards one day we'll be at a place where we can actually track the ROI of AI. I think the former seems easier to track versus the latter, given that if AI is part of your, say, marketing team's budget, and you can see what are we getting back in return. So it's almost like the KPIs of the business level metrics that you cared about anyway is where you should be able to compare yourself to say, are we better with AI and at what cost? I think a lot of times, for example, if you take recruiters and you say, no, we're going to use a SaaS company that does all our recruitment strategy. It can do the interviews and everything else. And then you look at the number of interviews we've done, even after it's been passed, and the number of people we've hired is still lower, and it still takes longer than we had a human in the loop. But the cost on aggregate is still, might as well just hire a recruiter anyway, right? So I think getting away from just purely looking at AI as a cost metric and starting to now embed it in towards, what was the point anyway? What was the point of this division? What was the point of this group in my company? And holding and merging AI spend with that and saying the total KPI is a KPI. That's all we really care about. Without that, I think we'll still be in this place of line in the sand is drawn in January. The models got increasingly better by July. And now we have a lot more use of AI than we even thought about in January. Of course, the budget's going to be overrun.
Yes.
Right. And in fact, if you're trying to manage against a number that you had arbitrarily chosen in the beginning, especially technologists moving so quickly, what I think you're really doing is stifling your own growth, right? You have individuals who are worried about, I don't want to use AI for this because my tokens will run out. So again, I don't think there's a right answer, but at the same time, you can't allow everyone in your company to run amok and say, everyone has to spend a minimum of $10,000 a year on AI. Then people will just gamify it and get away from it. So it's a problem I think everyone is still trying to figure out of what is a budget for experimentation? What is a budget for us? How do we incentivize our companies and employees to start using AI effectively? And then finally, now, how do we actually control these costs that worst case scenario, everyone leans into AI. We're all using it and we don't know how to track the output yet. And yet the costs are going up and up.
Yes. And I think we'll have those proxies in between that are going to take all the requests and potentially aggregate some of them. We will use all the good old ways. So we will aggregate requests. We will optimize requests. We'll change prompts to make them more efficient in an automated way. We'll use AI to optimize AI, that's for sure. Going back 1 second to I think the very interesting topic of the KPIs, how we're going to measure the results that AI is bringing. And you correctly say that if you're using for internal purposes, you're going to see it because you know how much things are costing today. And so you're going to be able to compare things. But if we go it to the bare minimum and we go as high as we can, in this case, to probably shareholders level, you could say that if you're focusing on operational excellence, what you want to see is an increase in margin. You want to see that the other numbers, revenue is growing by, I don't know, 5%. You want margin to have an impact. Margin could just, revenue could go up and margin stays the same. No, I want to see margin going up thanks to AI, or without other explanation that this is due to our new AI usage. That's going to be operational excellence. If you're going to use AI to expand into new markets, revenue is your number. Are we increasing revenue without having done anything particularly special? Oh, having just, for example, you said marketing. Did we have a big AI-driven campaign for marketing that costed 10? Did we see a result of 100 or 200 in our revenue growth?
You brought up shareholders and C-suite. I think another very key point that stuck out to me in the report was this gap between seniority and the confidence they have on the FinOps side. So I think the study said that 93% of C-suites say they were mature in AI tracking. And the one level below, the actual managers, operations people, said they were 60% mature in the same exact organization.
Yes.
Right. It's a pretty big gap, right? We're talking about 33-point gap between it almost feels like perception versus reality, right?
Yes, that's
so I want to unpack that with you. Why do you think that is?
There is definitely, I think, one aspect is the vision, is that the leadership sees, they have a vision of how we're controlling and how they're feeling we are controlling things. This is in particular thanks to the FinOps practitioners bringing the right reports upwards. What they don't see probably is how much work, potentially manual work, had that FinOps person done to get that report in a good state. So I think there is one way to see this, is that leadership of C-suites are receiving good reports, good feedback, because they are getting stuff that has been worked on very much by the FinOps practitioners. At the same time, the FinOps practitioner, having been using Excel to create those reports, will say, no, we're totally, and the same for manager, we're totally not ready for that, because as a financial leader, I had to dedicate 2 people for 1 week just to get this report and those numbers out. So I think there is this. There was another study recently by KPMG, which was about the board and how most of the boards do not feel confident that they really understand and can control AI. So I think there is another gap there between the board, the C-suite, and the managers. And that's quite an interesting disconnect that is coming from the speed of AI, and I think also the responsibilities, because board members are normally responsible criminally, let's put it, I think that's the word, on control or oversight of the company. So if AI does something completely crazy, the CEO might be fired, the board might go in jail. And so very more prudent and checking things, from what that report was showing, on can we control it? Can we have oversight? How do we make this work in the long term and not just now?
Yeah, around the controlling or the oversight, an interesting point that was brought up in there was the accountability question. Right? I think it was like 55% of accountability of this cost. I think the question is posed as, where does accountability sit for the AI's governance spend? And the answers were, you would assume, I guess I would assume naively, it's technology. It should be the CIO or CTO or the technology side of things. But it was really interesting that 55% said tech, 53% said finance, CEO. It almost felt like this shared ownership. And to me, when you don't have a DRI, like a directly responsible individual, shared ownership just means no ownership, right? You're able to say, yeah, we're all in this, we're all are managing it, and yet no one feels responsible to actually take actions or to drive the company forward in terms of accountability, because it feels like it's a it's a hot potato almost. Hey, we're still building it. We're still trying to figure it out. So I think that one really stuck out to me, this accountability thing. So curious to hear your thoughts on where do you think that should live, or whether it's shared is the only way to go?
I think it's the same way as the FinOps practices. If you can see there is a lot that goes to the CTO, CIO, but there is also quite a few which are under the CFO, even as FinOps practices in this case. So it's not just specific to AI only. Yet, I totally agree with you. When things go well, everyone will want a piece of yes, I was part of that. I was successful. I'm part of the winning team. But when things will go bad, or when decisions will have to be made, I think that's where we'll have lots of conflict. And what you just said will happen is, it will explode. Everyone will start fighting, debate, disagree. In my opinion, what we really need is to report, in this case, FinOps, but also probably AI needs to report to the COO. They need to go into the office of the COO, because this is, as we talked about earlier, this is something that is covering the company. You want marketing to use AI. You want HR to use AI. You want everyone. So who is going to have the power to, I would say, even force training on AI to absolutely everyone? Yes, it might be the CEO, but usually that's not their job. The thing that is making the company running, that's CEO job. And you want the CEO for AI to take ownership and then delegate all the technical implementation there and the financial decision with the CFO. And at the top, making the hard decisions. Because, as you say, for now it's fine. We're going in overrun. And it seems to be, you read the thing, 91% of companies are going into overrun. Yeah, it's all fine. It should not be fine in the future. We should have some control over that spend. We should be able to anticipate these spends. And I think that's where you would want to have the CEO almost as above CTO and CFO. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I like the idea. I like the idea of technology is a means to an end, especially technology that supersedes any one division. It really impacts your organization if you use it correctly. Like the COO side actually makes a lot of sense to me. I'm just thinking through it. Because at the end of the day, it is an operational efficiency gains, ideally, from AI. On one side, obviously, it's growth, right? You're going to grow your company because leveraging AI. Maybe you're selling AI products. You're embedding AI into your B2B SaaS company where someone can either query or use English now to interact with your SaaS product or headless. But on the internal side, I think that's where a lot of the gains will come that traditionally technology has been. You buy a SaaS product, you have to implement it, you have to configure it, you might get an engineer to manage it like Salesforce. But with AI, there's this level where the upskilling required to use, say, AI effectively is not something that'll be there'll always be a group of people in your company that are very AI pilled. They lean into it, they understand. I saw this optimization on Twitter last week or 2 weeks ago. Have you heard of this? It's called Caveman mode.
Oh,
Essentially,
yeah, I've heard, yes.
right? So for those who don't know, someone on Twitter figured out that tokens are expensive, and verbosity, where you ask one question and ChatGPT or Claude will spit out 2 pages of stuff. You're like, I didn't need all this. So they put up a skill or in their context.md file that talk to me like a caveman, 10 words or less for every response. And so all of a sudden you're able to limit the output tokens that are coming out, and they were able to reduce their cost by, say, 80%. Now that's an example, obviously that doesn't work all the time, but I think it's a real thing. When you have engineers, fine, and they're AI pilled, but for everyone else, say you open up Claude in 3 options, Opus 4.7, Haiku, and Sonnet, and you instinctively know Opus 4.7 is the most capable model. It can do the most interesting things. Of course, their first instinct is choose that model because they assume, I don't want a terrible response. I want the thing that I really need. And the questions, 80% of the stuff that non-technology might be asking Claude to do doesn't really require Opus. It might require even Haiku model, right? It might be that. So I think this abstraction layer of upskilling to understand how to use it effectively, efficiently, all those things has to come, to your point, not just from technology, who's really enabling AI in your company. It has to come from the operation side, say, how to use this tool effectively.
Yes. If we talked about this layer, this abstraction layer in between, that probably someone will build this, maybe we should, so that every request come to this layer, almost like a router, and it decides also the model and how we're going to change the prompt or the query so that it's more efficient in whatever way. It can be the answer or everything. And that could be something that is managed by technology, but the decision making of when do we use the costliest model, for example, should come from strategy, should come from the operational aspect of the companies. At the moment, we have a huge push on marketing. Yes, marketing will have access to the best model. They will have access to the biggest prompt. Fine. You developer, you are right now for this month, second on the line, you're going to get just the lines of code back. That's it. It's your job, human, to understand how to use them. Those are things that I think we will see, or better, they seem to follow from our discussion until now. And it is quite interesting. I'd like just to highlight something which is interesting, is we talked about the two types of companies. And I do believe that the COO is the best person to manage in operational excellence, and the hint is in the name. But at the same time, if we are going to go through growth, maybe we should have the CRO involved, because if we decide to say that the revenue is the KPI to show growth, to show success in growth, then maybe the CRO should manage that aspect. Maybe we should split that AI can approach. Is this an initiative for growth, or is this an initiative for operational excellence? I do still think that at the end, the FinOps persons and overall oversight should be at the COO level, but the CRO and maybe the CPO, the product, might be the element that we don't talk about enough.
Yeah, I think on the CRO side, so driving revenue, I guess it depends. If your offering is AI enabled, for lack of a better word, then on one hand, you can say, yes, the segment that we're selling this AI product to, we should be tracking, right? But I think for majority of the time, the question we're really grappling with, I think at most companies, is how are we getting more effective at building, at creating whatever our output is to the world? And can we be more efficient with AI than not? And how do we draw the line there? But no, that's an interesting point on the CRO side and the CPO. So let's talk about the timelines.
You're so brilliant by picking really the efficiency bit. You look very much European now.
So shifting gears, right? I guess the third and final thing that really stuck out to me in the report was around the patience clock, right? Now, to set the stage, if you think about when we transitioned to cloud, went from data centers to cloud, and you still have companies, massive companies, still transitioning. It's been over a decade, and we're still debating what is the best way to go from data centers to cloud, whether it's worth it, how do we get there, how do we track it, FinOps. That timeline was, say, a decade. With AI, I think the timeline is shortened by a magnitude. We're talking about within the next year, compared to this point last year and now, the story of AI has not leveled off to say, yeah, we implemented some AI. It's only getting bigger and bigger. And there's a level of urgency that I really haven't seen in this industry of getting this right immediately, right? So the runway that we're describing is like 81%, I think, are changing AI spend within 12 months. Are expecting quantifiable returns in the same window, right? Really scary, because quantifiable returns is something with AI I just think we're in the beginning innings of, right? We're still using AI in some ways just to do the same things we were doing before, but maybe a little bit more efficiently. We haven't even cracked the code yet or opened the chapter on how can we do things that we could never do before without AI, right? Massive analysis in real time, helping our salespeople to kind of answer questions on the call itself without saying my SE or we'll get back to you. Building these native AI experiences that previously weren't possible. So for understanding how to connect to someone who has Claude in their organization, how do we now offer them something that they can actually use without having to go to a SaaS window. We're still trying to figure all these things out, and yet
Absolutely.
the timeline of getting quantifiable returns is shorter than ever compared to any other technology that we've implemented at large scale.
Absolutely. And you've unpacked so many things in here. I was taking notes like super fast. By the way, there was a very funny graph. I think it was in The Economist that were highlighting the 3 scenarios for AI. So it's either going to dominate the world and cause mass extinction, option number 1, or it's going to be at the end, it's going to be just super expensive, so expensive that we're going to keep humans, or you say it's just going to be that middle thing that's barely better than Excel. And it was mostly fun and to force you to think, but the article around it is quite interesting, and it was fun to be presented with those caricatural outcomes, which are what you hear when you listen to I'll call it noise on social media, is you hear only about these extremes. And in the same way, we are only listening about success stories, which I think for me create that clock is why is everyone else managing to create extraordinary things in seconds or, in days, when you still tell me that it will take 3 months with 20 engineers. And there is this quality problem. I've seen and work with some people who do AI for a high quality standard, the above 80-20. So they are doing 80% of the work. That's going to be the last 20% of success. And it's hard. So I think we are getting, and everyone is getting, under the impression that AI is helping everyone get the same result as before in half of the time without almost any work. While there is a very well-known CTO, and I cannot remember his name right now, but he was saying, he asked AI to just triage tickets. He said, I just want to see critical tickets. I want you to triage, remove everything else. And he said, AI was still getting it wrong 20% of the time. And he said, if that would happen with a person, I would have my head of engineer coming to me and asking me to get rid of that person. They are failing too often. And so he had to add steps, which said, sometime I just need to have, you do step A, B, C, D, and then I'll ask LLMs. And that's the mix. It's still unclear, is what is the quality we're expecting? Quality is hard to achieve with LLMs. Having something which is, let's consider it mediocre, is extremely fast and easy. Having your little application that does roughly what you want it to be works. Having something that's been defined at product team with UX, UI, and all this stuff, less. And last but not least, I've lost my last bit. Sorry, Crispin, you'll have to cut that one.
One of the things that they talked about in the report was there's this interesting inversion, right? Traditionally, that the finance leaders, when you think about FinOps, are the ones who are always saying, I still want to use this data to get better insights or be able to drive better decision making. And technology is the one, or FinOps practitioners are the ones who are ahead of the curve, right? They're able to think about, say, commitment-based discounts or cost attribution to solve problem, blah, blah, blah. But here it feels like it's opposite, where when finance leaders are running ahead of practitioners of unit economics specifically, right? I think it was 26% of finance leaders said they had implemented a large enterprise's unit economics, and yet less than 20% of the FinOps Foundation data says people have actually implemented unit economics there. To me, it feels like it's because accountability is driving adoption faster than the tooling itself, right? When you think about finance leaders who own the budget and they have to defend the budget, they're going to implement these measurements before the practitioners can even implement the infrastructure to allow it, right? They know that when you think about, say, cost attribution, synthetic tags, custom metrics, you name it, it all is a means to an end to get accountability. To get accountability of saying these individual or group of individuals in a team have this amount of spend, and we want to be able to track it. And if they go over a certain number, again, it's not to shut anything down, but we need a justification why. And I think from finance perspective, that's always been the mandate, given that we're not creating budgets that are variable the way cloud spend is, and definitely not variable the way AI spend is, right? You have an off week and all of a sudden spend craters, and you're working on a sprint that you have to release, and AI spend is going massively, justifying that, quantifying it, trying to control it is something finance obviously wants to be able to do. And yet, I don't know, it just feels like it's going to be harder than ever now. So for a lot of these finance leaders who are saying, yes, we want unit economics in place, right? And to be able to understand what is the output, what is a quantifiable metric that we can track against, that this is a value we're creating. Of course, that's needed. And I think more than ever, finance will demand it. I just don't know if there are tools that can, again, 20% of practitioners say unit economics is still difficult. How many will actually to implement AI unit economics, right? Between different models, between the context quality, between the output, between the ROI, on and on. I just don't see us being able to crack that puzzle when we're still struggling with unit economics for traditional infrastructure.
Yes, and I would say that I think there is also a big difference in scale, and that comes from my top-down FinOps, is when you are, as you correctly said, the CFO, and you are presenting the numbers back to the board, you're usually not presenting unit economic as, oh, we have a transaction that costs $2. You present, we've spent 10 million in these following initiatives, the return is this. It's a unit economic, in my opinion, at a different scale. It's a unit economic probably at the project level, at the budget allocation level. I've allocated this budget. This is how we've decided that we're going to calculate the return on investment. And this is the return on investment. We're going to kill this project. We're going to keep this project. You don't even have to go into the individual people. So I think the gap that we see there is due to the different vision, how you need to defend your numbers toward others. We still, in FinOps, very often come from the idea that it needs to be technical. We need to know the cost per transaction. The unit economic is very granular. I think it's not always needed there. So, but on a slightly different topic, but still triggered by your thoughts, is one way for development to see if AI is helping is agile points, story points. Can a team do more points? Or are we changing the number of points we allocate to stories since we're using AI? I think that would be an extremely interesting thing to see. So is complexity of a certain activity going down in point in the perception of developers thanks to AI? So doing this moves from being a 5 to a 1. That would be showcasing that we have increased velocity. And for the people that are not coming from agile environment, is every time you have a list of stories, so which are features, and the team meets together and they pick a card, which is how they think the complexity of that thing is. Because as human, we are not really good with defining time, but we are really good at defining comparison. So if we were to say that 1 is something trivial and simple, like changing the color of the background is 1, how much this feature would be compared to it? Would it be twice the complexity, 5 times, 10 times, 100 times more complex? And that's what people do, and we take all these numbers and we understand, we create what is called the velocity. So a team can do 300 points per sprint, so per group of doing. Can we now do still 300 points, but these 300 points do many more stories? Or if we were to be able to keep the same quality, can we now do 400, 500, 600 points for every sprint? That would be a really good metric for us to control.
Yeah, and then thinking about how do we now do this across, not just even engineering, right? Going back to saying, how is finance using it? How is marketing or product, right? Product ideation towards hypothesis, to testing, to tracking the validity of a feature. Can all of that be sped up as well? And if so, what is the baseline there? So I think that this idea of this patience clock of within 12 months, people want to be able to quantify their returns. I think the companies that are able to go from, did we overspend or not, which I think this report covered, towards what did we get for it?
Yes.
The ones who can survive this patience window and realize like, okay, this will get better. And finally, when they're able to start answering that second question, what are we getting back in return? I think those are the companies that will actually start thriving in this AI reality going forward, versus if you get frustrated, finance is like, okay, the experiment is over, it's been 2 years, we're spending more and more, you can't track it, we're gonna have to start putting limits. I feel like just as companies will start getting really the valuable output, even if they can't quantify it just yet, right? It'd be a shame to be able to shut that down or start severely limiting it when these tools are finally coming to a place where they can be quantifiable returns. So I think surviving this patience window the next 12 months until, again, it will get solved. It'll get solved the same way when we initially got Kubernetes and we looked at cost data and we're like, we have no idea whether we're spending more or less than VMs. And then eventually we figured out, hey, we can use labels. We can have OTel data that we can now combine to say this pod is an efficient workload level. The same thing's gonna happen for AI, right? And it's gonna happen to me sooner rather than later. But to me, it's just like, as long as you don't lose hope in saying this is an untractable problem, let's just shut it down or limit it because we don't have a good enough story to tell to justify the spend going forward. So just patience, I think, for the next 12 months will be really key.
Yes, I think also risk will be very key. If I would say, can we highlight and present decisions back to decision maker that carry risk? What is this project with AI done? You are positive on saying that we need to be patient around this. I also see a part which is, are we going to be able to potentially kill projects which are not delivering fast enough so we can really focus all our energy on the ones that are working? Finding focus, as I say, you say, as we all say, there are technical company which are working on this right now. They have the same problem. Everyone has the same problem. And so we are working. And so companies which are technical, they'll create solution. And as soon as they'll see that it is sellable, they'll present it back to you in some formal way so you can buy it from them. So I think the patient is really good because you can wait for some people or others also to find solution. What are the use cases that really bring value? What are the things that work with AI better? At the same time, I think there is a governance aspect of saying what is important for me, which goes back to that distinction between we want to be operationally more efficient or growth. Where are we going to accept and be very patient and finding what works for us? Is it direction A or direction B? I think that's in some way the mix and match of your message and my message.
Absolutely. With that, I think we should wrap up. The report that we reference will be downloadable. The link should be available on the page where this podcast is sitting. With that, Frank, thanks so much for another great conversation.
Thank you very much, Amit, for bringing it all up. And yeah, do it, guys. Thank you very much for doing that survey. That was really useful to have numbers to discuss and see how everything is evolving around us. So
Absolutely.
No pressure. Do another one.
All right. I think next time we'll be in San Diego. So see you at
Yes.
FinOps X already.
See you there.